in my favorite class together that was a small class as, master's social work students. And so we're sitting around a table, and she says, well, we're introducing ourselves. And she says, well, my name is Rolanda. It's kind of an unusual name. And I said, it's not that unusual. I said, I've met people named Rolanda before.
Right.
And it was you. No, I didn't realize it yet. And then we're like, oh, yeah, oh, really? And so I'm a social worker. Oh, I'm a social worker too. Oh, I went to Boston University. Oh, I went to Boston. Then we realized, that we had been, together. So anyway, she's great. She really is. So.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah,
So
she is amazing, and it's been so great. She's given me a lot of opportunity to do work at Niagara University, and she's a really good contact to have, a good person in general.
She is a great person.
Yeah, she's great.
Yep.
Facebook is ready when we're ready.
Okay, so if we're ready, I think we're ready. Now, you had a little run of show thing there, right? It's very general. We're just going to, intros and values and then the situation with the moratorium, and then some broadening it out a little more and, into the economic injustices in general. And then about what we want people to do, especially about the good cause legislation, but then also in general how people can get more involved in housing and economic issues.
Of course, and that was definitely John's piece, just so that you know, but I'm going to try to cover as much as I can, and with Angel's help, I know I'll be able to do that.
Which piece was John's?
I'm sorry?
Which piece was John's?
The good cause.
I got you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the good cause legislation, right. So
important.
And basically, I even put it in the description about, Kathy Hochul's number or how to get other people's numbers and call about it. But it's just this week. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so Facebook is ready and Richard is ready. And I think if you're all ready and do you have water or anything? Oh, and turning off my phone. Turning off the phone. So if you all are ready, then
You should go on here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and the one thing is about my picture. Is that something?
They can see you.
Oh, they can see me? Oh,
Can't
because
they?
it looks
You mean
different
you're
than
saying
usual.
they can't?
Well, I don't see me.
Okay, let's see if we can get you on the picture.
Usually
on
I
the screen.
can see me too. Not that I need to see me.
Well.
I just want to make sure that what we're looking at on
see here.
Facebook to people is the whole thing. I don't really need to see me. I see me plenty.
No, it's fine. I can add you.
Yeah, just to make sure that, because now I'm calling this a video/radio show, because with the video, now sometimes, lately I think, I don't know, it ebbs and flows. We've had hundreds of views sometimes, even thousands of views sometimes, and then lots of times it'll just be dozens and, be
there you are.
Yeah, there I am, yep.
I would say when you do the ask to, if you do an ask to call Governor Hochul,
Yep.
if just one of you can make the ask, just because I don't want, technically that's lobbying, and my job would have to report that, and
Okay.
it gets a little iffy if I do it.
Oh, so you're not going to do that part?
Yeah,
Good.
I won't make the ask. I can just explain the legislation and why it's important, and then
Sure.
I don't mind.
Sure. I'm very comfortable because actually I've looked at the legislation about the 501c3s and everything, and the thing is they say you can't do too much lobbying. You can do some lobbying. You just can't do too much. So they don't tell you what that is, and so that,
Vicki, do you want to be bigger on the screen?
No.
Do you like being smaller?
Maybe I would be a little bit bigger on the screen just because so that I'm more in line with the same sizes as everybody.
Okay.
But doesn't matter. Should I be here a little more? Yeah. Good. Perfect.
Okay.
Wonderful. Great.
Are we live tonight on YouTube?
We'll be live on Facebook, and then we'll we'll be. The audio goes to WBNY, and then the YouTube, it comes up. Richard, you usually get it up this week,
I try to do it the same day.
Yeah, same day or same day or two. Yeah. So it'll be very shortly. Very
Awesome.
shortly.
Very exciting.
Yeah. Okay. My stomach is just a little bit. So I'm eating something. Ginger. I'm embarrassed.
No, don't be.
Okay. Okay, so I think I'm almost ready. Are you all ready?
We're ready.
Okay.
Okay, flip the silver switch that turns the timer on. Is the light on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, put the clapper in front of your face. When you hit the clapper, you're on the air.
Thanks. Welcome to Talking Peace, being recorded here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future. Thanks to our friend and producer, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. And being also broadcast on our very own WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station, courtesy of our dear SUNY Buff State. So I'm Vicki Ross. I am the community coordinator at the Western New York Peace Center, and I'm very excited about our important topic of today. We are going to be talking about housing, and actually we're talking about an eviction emergency and economic injustices here in New York State. So for that, we have two very excellent guests and friends of the show. I'll go counterclockwise as our indigenous friends do, and of course we're on the Haudenosaunee territory here. So we'll be thankful for the whole creation and for all their wisdom that reminds us, and we'll go counterclockwise most times. So I'll start with Cheney Brockington. Hi, Cheney.
Hi again, and Vicki and Richard, thank you so much for having me. My name is Cheney Brockington. I am currently serving as a licensed mental health counselor here in the Buffalo area, originally from the Hudson Valley. Currently involved, I'm a board member with the WNYPC Center, just a big advocate for social justice and social change, and also currently serve as advocacy chair for the Buffalo Urban League. Really excited to be here today and talk about housing as we're getting closer and closer to the end of the moratorium. And yeah, just grateful to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, you're such an expert on this subject, so I'm very excited. And plus, as a fellow, or as another social worker, I especially say, the wisdom that will come. So, and speaking of wisdom, so we'll get plenty of energy and insights from our other guest, Angel Rosado. Hi, Angel.
Hello, my name is Angel Rosado. I'm the lead organizer of Citizen Action's Western New York chapter, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're so grateful for your coming in. And this is a very critical topic and very current topic, because the eviction moratorium that we've had is just about to expire, and there's a lot of activity needed. So far, we haven't gotten any indication from Governor Hochul, that she's going to extend it. So I want to ask Cheney, if you would sort of introduce that whole, when did it start, and what has been the effect of the eviction moratorium, and then now what's looming here.
Absolutely. So, I always struggle to start with this, because I think that one of the topics that's really been coming up for New York State right now, especially in Western New York, it's the second biggest city in New York State, has been this idea of a housing crisis. And I really struggle with that word, especially as it relates to the pandemic, because New York has been in a housing crisis for quite some time. And Buffalo has been in a housing crisis for quite some time. We are one of the poorest cities, not in the state, but in the nation. We have a whopping, I believe it's almost 13 or 14% prior to COVID, that actually were facing eviction or facing direct homelessness as a result of eviction prior to the COVID pandemic. However, when we're talking about this eviction moratorium, COVID changed a lot for a lot of people.
Right.
But specifically for Black and Brown communities and for communities that are at risk and at large, which is the entire Buffalo community, it really changed a lot and had direct impact into families, children, homes in a really, really major way. Because people that were already struggling, that were at or below the poverty level or near the poverty threshold prior to COVID even starting, then faced a secondary pandemic when COVID-19 hit. And so people were unable to take care of paying for their rent, making sure they stay up to date with their income. And, as you know, once you fall behind with 1 month, it's easy to then fall behind on all the bills. And for a lot of people, that was crushing. I mean, not just in terms of the anxiety and depression and all of that stuff that can come with it, just added stress, but literally financially crippled by not being able to afford to take care of their rent or take care of their mortgages, take care of their in-rem certifications and all of that stuff. And so as a result, the state and many states actually, pushed over this eviction moratorium, which is really just a hold. What it does is it stops landlords from being able to evict someone based off of a financial hardship that is cause of the COVID pandemic. So, for example, someone has lost their job, right, and isn't able to work in the same field, which hundreds of people lost their jobs with COVID, right, or were exposed to COVID and as a result weren't able to work. It's a global pandemic. And so if there are circumstances such as that, or there's another financial hardship that has come into play because of COVID, that protects individuals to still be able to have housing, to still be able to have a place to sleep at night, right? We recognize the fact that that's really difficult for property owners that also, utilize, rent and mortgages and whatnot as a source of income. However, housing is a human right, right? And we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to have a place to sleep at night. We know that there are huge disparities and huge intersectionalities between not having a safe space to be able to lay your head at night and being able to be successful in this country and so many other areas and across the world as well. And so what the eviction moratorium really does is it kind of creates that additional safety net for everybody, right? To be able to make sure that if there is a hardship that's been created as a result of this pandemic, you still have a place to live. Even though the pandemic is still raging and we have numbers that are surging and are clearly, just increasing day by day, and we're seeing that especially here in Western New York, that moratorium is set to expire. It's been extended a couple of times. However, January 15th, it's set to expire, which is going to put an astronomical number of people in a very, very difficult position because like I said multiple times, and as I'll probably say more times than not on tonight's show,
Right.
COVID is still going on, right? But B, expecting individuals to then have these surplus numbers or surplus amounts of money after literally facing these hardships for over 2 years, it's just not really a feasible idea. So with this moratorium, it's set to expire the 15th. It's really going to put a lot of individuals at risk for homelessness and a lot of people who are already facing a pandemic prior to COVID-19 in a really dire spot, which is really concerning and should be concerning to the state.
I'm glad you brought up about values. And one of the things that, I meant to do right off the bat is, when we're thinking about this issue, we think about different values. How do they come to play in this issue? And you brought it up about housing is a human right. So I want to really, emphasize that, lift that up, and also invite you also, Angel. What would you say, for the human, for the values that you see in this topic or in this issue right now, as we're discussing it tonight? What are some of the things that you think come into play for values?
I mean, obviously, again, what are human rights? Like, housing is a human right. Healthcare is a human right. I mean, food is a human right. Like, everybody should be fed. Everybody should have a place to sleep that has a roof over their head. Everybody is entitled to see a doctor. All of those things. But then also, what our values is what do we value as far as how we spend our money? Like, budgets, as we know, are moral documents. The more money we spend on something means obviously it's a priority to us, and the less money we spend on something is less a priority. If my phone bill is $60, you know what I mean? It's probably not that big of a priority that I have a crazy plan. You know what I mean? So like it's very clear, like when we budget for things, what's important and what isn't. And I mean, the way we spend money on as a government, like the way we as a country and state spend money on like the shelter system, and like I'm not saying shelters are bad because obviously they're needed, but if we had that same investment into actually housing folks to get them out of the shelter and into a house, like we would be doing great. But we invest money into temporary fixes instead of getting to the root cause of the problem because it's going to undercut somebody's bottom line. I don't care how much a landlord like is making off of somebody. Like I don't care how much large developers are losing out if somebody has a place to live. Like if your profit margin can be disrupted by the fact you can't put a family out in the cold in the middle of December, you probably don't have a good business model. Like it's probably not a good business model, and you probably should find a new way to make some money. If we have to compromise the fact people having somewhere to live, because also your values are like, and this is a more extreme probably thing for me, but like if you evict a family in December or like in the middle of a raging pandemic, like, yo, that's attempted murder. Or at least like manslaughter if something happens to them. Because we know in Buffalo what winters can be. We've had an unusual one, but we know putting someone out in the middle of December in Buffalo with nowhere to go is likely a death sentence. Whether it's from the cold, whether it's from a disease they pick up and they can't get the health care, and especially in a pandemic. So you have the cold and COVID everywhere. Like you're going to kill people. You know what I mean? Like an eviction is not just they have to move. And in a situation like winter in Buffalo or under a pandemic, this is not just they're going to be unhoused. This is like people are going to die.
Right.
And that needs to be like at the forefront of every conversation is that people will die. Not can die, not might die, like they will. And we have to then have the political will to do something about that. And I just wish more of our officials had that kind of will in general.
Well, I really appreciate everything you just said and that you've both, put out there for this conversation. And I just want to add as a value, I usually think of truth and love, which Dr. King, will be, of course, his birthday, right, coming right up, said, unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. That's why good temporarily defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. So I look to that for a lot of encouragement because that's the real encouragement that we need. Actually, John Washington, who we had hoped to have on this show, I first saw that quote from him putting it out. And I do, that's really one of my favorite quotes. And those values of unarmed truth and unconditional love. And the truth is that, our income and asset distribution is the worst in the developed world. And it has gotten steadily worse since Reagan on throughout. It's gotten, or with very small little jiggling, it's mostly just going down, down, down. And certainly in this pandemic, even though people have been given, the odd check here or there, we've seen a huge movement of monies up to the millionaires and billionaires who already have more than they need and away from the people who are hurting the most. So I want to say that, that unarmed truth and unconditional love means look at that and put people before profits. And especially before the profits of people who already have a ton of money. So moving a little bit, so that the values will still continue, percolating through the talk, but as we talk. But one of the things I want to ask about is, so what about the small landlord or the people with the landlord with a mortgage and things like that? Is there, that's sort of the first question about that is, so how do they think about having a mortgage moratoriums for people or anything like that? Is that on the table at all or no? Do you know? Either of you?
I mean, it's a thought idea that was thrown around in a couple conversations I had of like a foreclosure moratorium. Like banks should not be able to foreclose on families, for back mortgage in this time because, you know what I mean?
Right.
So like not everybody who has a mortgage is a landlord either. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like,
Oh, right.
and
Absolutely. No, there's plenty of people
and
having
so that
trouble
was
with
like
their
some of the,
mortgages.
yeah, that was some of the conversation, like for that point as well, is like, but I think the thing, whatever it was, is I think the conversation was it would have to come from the federal government or whichever, it had to come from the federal or the state government, but I can't remember who would have been responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a couple conversations where we were like, a foreclosure moratorium also needs to happen because if you're a single family living in a house that you pay a mortgage on and you don't have tenants, like, and you lose your job, you're behind on the mortgage. So, like, that was something that was floated. I think it never really got off the ground because a problem we had was like this division of like tenants and landlords. When, in my opinion, like if you're a like landlord with a tenant, but like you're not a billionaire, like honestly, like you're another form of a renter because you're one missed tax payment away to the city, one missed mortgage payment, like you're one little slip up financially in your life from not owning that home anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the biggest like thing to remember is like unless you're super rich and wealthy and have the disposable income like that to just bounce back from something, like everybody got to pay somebody. And realistically, we're all one check away or two checks away from not being able to pay whoever we got to pay.
Right.
So it's like that's the reality of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think just to add off of that, I don't know
Yes.
on offhand, one of the things that is available for landlords and tenants alike is the emergency rental assistance program. I hope I'm not stealing anybody's thunder by talking about ERAP already.
Please.
But, emergency rental assistance is a program. I'm not exactly sure the timeline of how long it's been out. I believe it's been out for almost a year now, if not a little bit under 10 months. Which does offer both landlords and tenants alike. I believe that there's kind of a joint filing process in some way, shape, or form, or some way that landlords can verify the tenant's information that there is a financial hardship related to COVID, where you can receive rental assistance immediately, right? So you can receive up to 15 months of back paid rent, depending on the financial hardship, so that landlords, right, that have not been able to receive income from tenants, because that's been a huge part of what we've been hearing as a lot of kind of the backlash surrounding good cause eviction and wanting to extend the eviction moratorium is, what about the landlords? What about the, low income, middle class landlords, or, non-developer type of landlords, kind of homegrown, that are not, making income or not able to take care of their own bills because their tenants are unable to take care of their rent at the time due to the financial hardship. And so these landlords are eligible as well to receive this back payment on rent, so that they're able to take care of their bills, but also stay up to date and not have to, hoard the court, so to speak, with eviction proceedings and notices and all of that stuff as well.
Right. Well, that is very important, and that would be very important, especially right now. Although certainly the eviction moratorium ending is puts more, will. I mean, that's an avenue that people can pursue, as it's looming. But there still might be some time lag and things, and we still want to see the moratorium continued for the people who really need it. So I think one of the things that people don't think about is some of these people are sick at home, and that's as we said, in the winter, as Angel, you put it so beautifully, in the winter, in the COVID. That people being put out, it's just the worst possible time to think of ending, of making it harder for people to stay in their homes. So I'd like to broaden it out a little bit, though, too, to just say, how is this systemic inequality an economic injustice in our society, some of the things that you all notice about it. I know I have some things I'd like to observe too, but I like, back to what are some of the things that you see? Well, first we'll start with Cheney, and then you, Angel, as sort of symptomatic of the economic injustice that is often promoted or perpetuated in our society.
Oh God, that's such a loaded question. But I'm
There's a
going to
lot of different pieces to it. I know that.
with a lot of different pieces, and I'm
Right.
sure that you'll pick up where I left off. So we can tag team this together.
Sure.
But there's so many different thoughts going through my mind, and Vicki, as to what you said before previously, in regards to just the values and the mission, and just thinking about the Coles, as you said before. It immediately made me think of just the past week, right? Here in Buffalo, where we've seen some below sub-zero wind chills. We've had some, single-digit temperatures. We're about to go into some pretty serious ones into this weekend. And we do not have, I just immediately what came to mind is just capacity, right? Right now in Western New York, we do not have the capacity to be able to properly house individuals in this area. We are not developing and building housing that is equipped for the population that we're working with. And I think that that's something that's always very frustrating for me. And I'm not trying to immediately go after, property development here, but, I think about the renovations and, just the gentrification and what's been happening, especially in our county and specifically in the city of Buffalo lately. And I've been seeing so much development of property, and just some renovations. We've been talking a lot about new stadiums. We've been talking about Canal Side lately. And that is not representative of the population of Buffalo, right? In the same way that Google and Amazon and all these feel-good commercials that we see around the holidays are not representative of what a lot of Americans have faced as a result of the pandemic. Canal Side and new stadiums and new property development is not representative of the population. We have a very impoverished population here in Buffalo. We have a large majority of its citizens that are at or below poverty threshold, or 50% below area median income. We've had a lot of loss that people have suffered as a result of the pandemic, but we've had a lot of loss that's happened prior to that. And there's been a history in our city of systemic, in Erie County as a whole, but specifically in Western New York and in the city of Buffalo, there's been a history of systemic racism that has legitimately promulgated the expansion of big business, the expansion of gentrification, the expansion of segregation of housing for so many communities, specifically communities of color. And when we talk about the economic impact that has had on families and on children and on schools, and just in taxpayer funding and allocation of services and allocation of resources, it's just all so interconnected. It's literally like the perfect soup and perfect recipe for a storm and for a disaster waiting to happen. We've been on the brink of facing a homelessness crisis for some time, and I think that COVID was kind of just like the cake topper. But the systemic racism and the systemic economic injustices were really the icing. And those have been happening. It's been happening for so long. So I guess for me, when I think of that question, and when I just think of where we are right now, there's a problem. And I know we're going to probably talk about affordable housing later. But, we have a lot of development that's happening in the city right now, right? Not just with structures for social activity and gatherings, but specifically for housing. I mean, every time I turn around in different parts of the city, I see new warehouses, new lofts being built, new properties that are being developed. And these properties are starting at prices in range of $1,200 to $1,300. I mean, these are literally New York City prices for spots that are literally right down on Main Street or right down on Jefferson Avenue. And the effect that is having, right, is that it's also encouraging maybe small mom and pop landlords, as well as more, well-known names and well-known development and property management agencies, to really kind of hike up rents, right? To what we see is rent spiking, right? So that even properties that aren't new and improved, that aren't new and refurbished, are now being, having rent increases of, $50 to $250, which people can then not afford to pay. And so we have people that are being pushed out of their homes that cannot afford to live and are looking for new spaces that are now unaffordable. We have gentrification that is literally taking over communities that have been forgotten about for so many years. And we just kind of have like this cyclical, weird tornado happening of just housing crisis in our city. And we have elected officials, both on a state level, but also right here on a local level, that could do something about it. And anyone that tells me they can't do something about it is unfortunately pretty delusional, because there's always something that can be done. And it hasn't been done, and it's still not being done. And I think that that's probably the saddest thing of all.
I think I've heard people saying we're doing that. We're already doing that. I thought that's what I heard. We're already doing that? No? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be sarcastic. Anyway, Angel, please, what would you say in terms of the economic, the sort of broadening it out to housing in the economic injustice picture, sort of, how it fits into that broader backdrop?
Yeah. First up, I think 485A, which is a state law tax exemption, is the biggest mistake. One of the biggest mistakes that the state of New York has made, like, in a long time. Basically, it boils down to, if you build commercial and residential into a development property and you make a certain percentage, which is not a high percentage either, of them considered quote unquote affordable, which we all know isn't a great standard for affordability anyway. So it's all one big scam. But as long as you do all of that, you pay, I think, like, no property taxes to the city. You still pay state, yes, but you pay no city property taxes for a certain number of years. And then after that number of years, you're gradually phased into your like amount you're supposed to pay. But the overall process before you even get back to that amount is like 10 to 12 years. Like, it's a long time that you're that they don't pay what they should. And we all have to pick up for that. Like, the renters have to pick up for that because we have to pay more rent so the landlord can cover their joints. And the homeowners pick up for that because their taxes have to go up to make up for the fact that they're not paying it. And we can't just not pay, because then the schools suffer. And the schools are already underfunded. So, like, what options do we have, right? And the city could opt out of that. They could no longer give that tax exemption to anyone within the city limits. It's very well possible. And the state could also just choose not to have that as a tax law anymore. Like, both municipalities, like, have the option to do something about it. And that's, like, first up, just because of the mention of development in Buffalo. Like, that's one of the biggest problems, is that tax law specifically. And there's two different ways to get that to not be a problem anymore. And we're not seeing it done by either party. And the broader term of economic injustice and systemic racism and all those things is, like, we know very clearly that America has done everything and anything possible to destroy the wealth of Black and brown communities over time. And that's why the Kensington Expressway was built. That was a Black neighborhood that was flourishing, and they decided to build an expressway through it. Why? To benefit white suburban drivers who wanted to come to downtown or cut through the city and all those things, but didn't want to go through Black neighborhoods. And it doubled as a way to stop black people from building wealth as well. It was a win-win for them. But now we see that those neighborhoods around the Kensington Expressway, like, have higher rates of asthma. And the Peace Bridge, while it's a great symbol of, like, unity between two countries, the constant traffic over the Peace Bridge is one of the reasons the West Side has high rates of asthma. Like, those things are not a coincidence at all. And those things are because those neighborhoods were not taken into account, and their health was not taken into account during the building of these projects, because it didn't matter. It was like, whether they were healthy or not was a non-concern as long as the project turned out the way they wanted. And now those same areas have pre-existing conditions, i.e. asthma, that make them more susceptible to dying or being like dealing with a permanent side effect of having COVID. So like even the pandemic we face today, certain neighborhoods are hit harder because they have rates of asthma, but they have that asthma because of racist policies and racist development. Like it is not, none of this is an accident. None of this has happened like because the universe so willed that black and brown folk should just be poor and unhealthy. Like, no, it's systemically been a problem and it's continuously a problem. And I just want to tie it back to my first point was like the will to do things. Like obviously like 485A, getting rid of that in the city of Buffalo and getting rid of the state of New York is not going to solve all our problems. But it's an easy thing to do that would at least start moving in the right direction. And if they're not even doing that, then like what conversation are we really having? You know what I mean? Like, are we really making meaningful steps? If you won't do the baby steps, how can I trust you to take a large leap? How can I have faith in that? Like, I can't. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just the reality that like nothing is an accident. All of this stuff is designed somewhere, and now we deal with either the intentional or the accidental byproducts of these decisions. And we see black and brown folk continuously struggling to get ahead because of all the racism systemically over time. It's all tied together, and it's there's no way to ignore it.
You know, one thing that you're making me think of is, you know, this recent, I think it was 17, 19 people died in New York City. And, you know, the fires. So we've had fires. We've had people dying from fires. They've been in the city. They've been in the country. You know, it's a lot of times when people can't afford, so they're using space heaters or different things, trying to cut corners to keep warm in this, you know, in the cold snaps, etc. And you're also making me think of, as you said, with the political will, so and policy choices. So I can't help bringing this up, and I know you've probably both heard me, and I've brought it up on the show before, of course, that when half of our federal budget is going into this, you know, I mean, into the military, industrial, congressional, contractor, prison industrial complex, all of Fear Inc., all the things that are about intimidating, controlling, incarcerating, or even killing people at home and abroad. They just passed a $768 billion program that's over half our discretionary budget, and it's more than the next 10 countries combined, and all that money is going into more nuclear weapons, you know, 900 bases all over the world. All of that money, it's an average of $6,000 per family, per household in the United States this year. So all of that money, if some fraction of that money, let's just say 10% of that money, let's say, you know, or 20% of that money was used for these things, to make sure that people have, you know, safe and affordable heating, to make sure that people's their roofs are not leaking, you know, to make sure that people are able to have their basic needs met, no matter what their situation or their health, you know, any disabilities or anything else, you know, public housing and other, you know, subsidies, those, instead of subsidizing all these, the fossil fuel industries and the whole military industrial, some of that money could be going into this. And yet when the ask is for the people who really need the money, it's like, oh, well, how can we afford it? How can we afford it? But nobody says when they can't shovel money fast enough into the military industrial contractor complex. Cannot shovel it in fast enough. For the last two years, you know, it's more, the military will ask for a certain amount, then the president, whichever, both of them, makes it even a bigger amount, and then Congress makes it an even bigger amount. Anyway.
Yeah.
But let me tell you how I really feel. No, I'm just anyway, terrible. Go ahead. Yes.
No, I was just gonna. I agree with you, Vicki, and it is really frustrating. And I just continue to encourage. I know that we're live streaming right now, and we'll be on Monday, and it's very exciting. But I continue to encourage people to really do the work to think for themselves,
Right.
Because we live in a capitalist society,
Mm-hmm.
right? But with that, that means that we live in a capitalist society. So the issues that you are talking about, right, when we talk about just putting a droplet, right, and there's some statistics and studies that show that if we were to take one additional percentage more of our defense and military funding, or 1% more of our current individual tax dollars, and it was utilized properly towards a social justice reparation, right, such as ending homelessness, or ending hunger and food insecurity and food desert in our communities, especially at-risk communities and marginalized communities, that would make humongous, astronomical differences. And so, I can't even stress enough, because I do hear this point a lot. People get very, very defensive when we talk about, ending homelessness and housing justice, right? And I think that what you said is so true. It can be done, right? It can be done. We are choosing not to do that. It is very, very easy for us to end homelessness. It is very, very easy for us to build more. And create more structures so that individuals in our society can have a place to live. There's incredible work being done with boots on the ground individuals who are continuing to do this work. Shout out to all the shelters in Western New York, but specifically, I just want to highlight Friends of Night People, right in the middle of Allen. They do fantastic work.
Right.
They provide medical resources, medical access for individuals, right? But could really utilize some additional funding, right, from our local and state leaders to be able to offer beds, so that we have a space to be able to have people sleep, right? So that they don't have to just get a meal and their resources and toiletries, and possibly have an opportunity to talk with a social worker, which are all important. But really, sometimes people are looking for a place to lay their head at night. And so I hear where you're coming from on the big picture thing, but even scaling it down just to local level, there are things that can be done.
Right.
We are choosing not to do them. And I always encourage everyone to just ask the question as to why are we choosing to do it, and how is it that we can hold the individuals that are choosing to do that accountable.
I want to bring us back again. This is a little bit back to, it's more of a big picture thing, but back to also taxation, the income and the economic injustices, because I want us to really think about. To me, what makes this expiration of the moratorium stings so badly is when we know that Elon Musk's billions are now over 300 billion. He has over 300 billion. Now, of course, he got all the tax breaks that he got down, for the Tesla. 300 billion, and his assets have increased by some, I think I read 30 billion, in the past little while during the COVID, right? 30 billion, where other people are just hoping that they will not be in the homeless shelter, right? So the fact, and he said, he's going to pay 11 billion in taxes this year. Well, that's because he paid next to nothing last year. So now he's bragging about paying a few billion. He's made 3 times that in increased profits over the and Jeff Bezos and Amazon, all the big money has gotten much bigger over the pandemic, and people have been able to reap tremendous rewards for the imbalances in the system. So that back to when we talk about the moratorium and we think about the mortgages and things, well, so that's about the banks. Well, the banks, you know, I know they have very thin margins, but they, you know, the stockholders and all of that may not be in such a position to need as much of a return as people need to keep their homes. Or the regressive tax rate, we have such regressive taxes that we don't really tax. It used to be that people were paying 70 or even 90% income taxes, you know, and that people like now there's barely two. I think there's only two categories where there used to be 9, and it would step up with every step on how rich the people were. That's not happening. You know, there's very little distinction, and then there's all the loopholes that the millionaires and billionaires get. I know Angel Citizen Action has done some work on that kind of thing, haven't they?
I believe in the past. I just know your whole like tax percentage thing goes in really beautifully to my next point.
Oh, good. Please.
So think about like if you look at the federal income tax bracket, right?
Mm-hmm.
For 2021 to 2022, it caps at a rate of 37%. And that's at $523,000, 601 or more. So, and the bracket below that is from 209,000 to the 523. So, what you're telling me is there's a $300,000 margin that there's no increase. Now, obviously, $209,000 is a lot of money to make in a year. But
Right.
You're telling me that 209,000 should pay the same tax rate as 523? No, that's a $300,000 difference in income.
Right.
So that should still be a higher percentage.
Right.
And then you're
Right.
telling me we cap it at 523,000 and everybody over that pays the same exact percentage as 523? You're telling me if I make $523,000, I pay 37%. But if I turn around and the next guy makes $2 billion in a year,
Right.
he pays the same exact percentage I do? That is still not like that's not fair. That's not fair taxation. And
Not
listen,
at all.
I will tell anybody who makes $500,000 a year in their face, if you're going to pay federal, like you should pay your taxes and you should pay the percentage you should. You realize how much money you make.
Right.
However, I also think it's unreasonable that that person pays 37% and the guy who made $1 million, 500 million, $1 billion pays the same exact 37% as they.
And 15 and 20 billion. Some people are. That's what we're saying. You know, it seems unthinkable, but
Yeah, like how does our tax rate cap at 37%?
right.
And how does the amount it increases at cap at $500,000? There are
Right.
so many people in this world, very, very rich people that will make way more than $500,000 in a year and will pay the same exact tax rate as that person.
Right. And
Like
then
that's ridiculous.
and back to what you were saying about the loopholes too. So that then if they even pay it. So Elon Musk, who went back when his billions was only, you know, like 280 billion or something. It was only 270 billion. Then he had all his loopholes, so he paid very little in taxes, and it was embarrassingly little. That's why he's been bragging about the 11 billion. But the 11 billion is still just a fraction of what he's making. So anyway, so when we look at all of that, I mean, I can't help putting that into the context because this COVID has been so harmful and damaging in so many ways, emotionally, physically, literally. But then the one of the, you know, other effects is this increasing imbalance in our already, you know, very skewed system, where, you know, money makes money, and, you know, and poverty brings more poverty, right? So that people, overdraft fees, or, you know, we've done a lot of work on these kinds of things where the more you need money, the more that money problem will breed more money problems, because you're in a bottomless pit there that, you know, you still have to live and you still have to meet those expenses, and you can't, so it keeps, you know, you keep getting hammered. So I think we've laid out the problem very well. So what are some of the solutions that we want? And one of them being, for those of you who see this, you can see that one of the things we're hoping for is calling Kathy Hochul to Governor Hochul to have her continue the moratorium, the eviction moratorium, among other policy changes that she could and should make. So maybe if Angel, if you would want to tell us a little more about the good cause legislation that is also a question in the state legislature, or either of both of you, to
I'll pass.
lay it out
I'm a
a
white
little.
passing Latin man. I get to talk a lot. Let's
Sure. So,
I'm a
Cheney,
pass it.
please. And Cheney, I want to thank you for hosting a webinar recently that is on all of these same issues. And is there a place people can find it if they want to also see that?
Actually, it was an in-person. It was back in November before we had this spike.
Right.
Unfortunately,
That's right. Now I remember. Right.
But thank you for acknowledging that. The Urban League, shout out to the Urban League again.
Right.
Did a fantastic job really doing some work at the Northland Workforce Training Center on housing and eviction moratorium. We had some fantastic individuals from Freed People.
Right.
We had Belmont Housing. We had Homeless Alliance, of Western New York. We had representative from PPG that really gave some amazing feedback on just good cause eviction. And then we also had Push Buffalo that was also present. So
Great.
really amazing event where John and Adam also had an opportunity to really speak on just good cause eviction a good cause and what that looks like. I continue to encourage everybody to head over to Housing Justice for All, again, housingjusticeforall.org, just to get a better understanding of the platform and understanding of the work that is being done. But good cause eviction, S3082, is really looking at evictions and displacement, right? Alongside some of the issues that I laid out before in regards to gentrification, in regards to rent spiking, in regards to financial hardships that have happened as a result of the pandemic, but also just looking at homelessness and poverty in at-risk and marginalized areas, which we consider Buffalo to be, is very, very common right now. And those consequences, right, continue to follow tenants and families over and over and over again.
Right.
And so really what good cause eviction is looking at is protecting individuals, protecting renters from unjust evictions, right? When we're talking about unjust evictions, we're not talking about evictions of good cause, and that's why the bill is called good cause eviction.
Right.
We're not talking about, owner use or lease violations, right? Not payment of rent, destroying a property, right? We're talking about things that cannot be controlled. We're talking about individuals that have legitimately been in their homes for decades, or have been renting a unit for quite some time, and then with gentrification and with increased displacement and with all these other factors that we've discussed before, are literally being pushed out of their homes and are unable to find anything else because the rent is too high, or because unfortunately right now we are dealing with a housing crisis in regards to just access to units, access to apartments, access to homes to be able to purchase. Even for those that are on the housing market, right? They've had honest conversations with many friends and family members and colleagues who are in the home buying process right now. And it's extremely tough because right now the housing market is really high and it can be difficult to maneuver. And so we're talking about those individuals. We're talking about individuals that are literally being pushed and displaced from their home. And that is really what good cause eviction is looking like. It's protecting from those unjust evictions. It's providing basic protections for millions of unregulated renters across New York State. Something that we didn't touch on, which, we may not have the time, but just kind of touching on this idea of slumlords, right? Taking a moment of silence for the number is really getting kind of out of control, but 50 plus individuals that have suffered as a result of the fire in the Bronx, and so many other huge housing violations that we have seen in New York City that have continued, but also huge housing violations that we've seen here.
Right.
We have organizations right here in Buffalo, specifically, such as Home, which does amazing work, that just do investigations on based off of racial and housing discrimination and unsanitary or unjust housing conditions.
Right.
And so what we're talking about right now is this idea that good cause is going to allow and make way for individuals who are living in their home, that have a right to be there, that are, paying their rent, taking care of their unit, doing what they need to do, right? Even if it's not perfect, that they're not just being displaced and promulgated out of their home because of unfair violations, because of unregulated landlords, because of, just reasons and excuses that are not backed and solidified with rationale from landlords. And I'm sure that there's more that Angel can say about that. But I'm just encouraging everybody to continue to do the work, to do the research before making assumptions about good cause eviction, to continue to go on Housing Justice for All for more information.
Sure.
Continue to encourage people to call Governor Hochul, Sean Ryan, Crystal Peoples-Stokes, to continue to have conversations with these people, give them calls, and to demand good cause. The info is everywhere, and it's just such an important issue right now.
And I would add that on the Western New York Peace Center website, if you want to get in touch with your legislators or any of the government officials for Western New York, they're listed on under organizing in Western New York. So it's really organizing and activism in Western New York. But those officials' contact info, local, state, and federal, are all in there. So it's a lot to do. But that's one of the places where there's activity and hope for change there on both of those things. So we want to get the moratorium extended and see about finally getting the good cause eviction passed. We're coming up towards the end of our time, believe it or not. So if I could ask you each to sort of, what's your bottom line for people, including ways to get more involved or, to learn more and get more involved. I know you said one of the big things that you're suggesting people should go to Housing Justice. It's Housing Justice for All, right?
That's correct. Yep, yeah. HousingJusticeForAll.org.
Right, .org. So people can go there. And so each of you sort of, what's your bottom line of what people need to remember and do about this? About that, the eviction emergency and the economic injustice. Angel, do you want to?
I'm going to pass the mic again.
You're going to pass. Well, it's back to the indigenous thing of going counterclockwise. So we'll go counterclockwise. We'll go to Cheney, then to you, and then, we'll have a great show. Yeah, we'll have had a great show. So, Cheney.
I know, you keep passing it to me.
I do keep passing it to you. We got the main point, but so it's just to, what do you want people to really remember, though?
No, I appreciate it. I'm hoping that with our conversation today, which has been chock full of such important information, but just also as we continue to move into these, very, very chilly months in Buffalo, that we all, just continue to remain in gratitude and with a little bit of compassion and self-love, but also awareness of some of the huge issues that we have that are going on in our city, in our state, but then federally. And worldwide. I think that when we're talking about homelessness, it's a big topic to discuss. I mean, I know that today is specifically talking about housing, but, we are literally, most individuals, most Americans, as a result of this pandemic, but also some of the factors we talked about before, are literally a paycheck away from homelessness, or a paycheck away from not being able to take care of themselves in the same way and in the same luxuries as we do right now, and as many of us are fortunate to be able to do right now. And so homelessness is a problem. our current housing crisis is a problem. There are ways that we can fix it. And if each of us are holding our elected officials accountable, we can fix it. The bare minimum is to do your own research. I know I already mentioned Housing Justice for All,
Right.
but to do your own research, learn about homelessness, go onto Netflix, watch Finding Home, learn about what's actually happening and why individuals oftentimes end up in situations where they are in a housing crisis. Medium ground would really be giving your state local officials again calls, and we have their numbers posted, and making sure that you are advocating for proper housing justice, good cause eviction, to extend the eviction moratorium, which will help so many New Yorkers and so many Buffalonians, and really at the best level, making sure that you're also boots on the ground and doing the work too, and I'm hopeful that we will continue to do that.
Thank you so much, Cheney. And Angel?
Shameless, absolutely shameless plug here, but I mean, go to www.citizenactionny.org and please look over our website, look over some of the events we have coming up, consider becoming a member. I encourage people, especially for low-income folks, $20 for a year. We have a housing committee that is going to be getting started up again. We have a climate committee, an education committee. We really want to tackle the intersectionality of all the issues.
Right.
And as the lead organizer, I want us to tackle it in an intersectional way.
Oh, good.
But that only comes from the membership that is, that understands it and is willing to, drive these things. It's the members that really drive the work we do, and really drive what policies we want to work on. And so, absolute shameless plug. Go on there, look over the website, look at our Justice Agenda launch that's coming up, where it details all of Citizens Action's statewide platform for the year, and just really want to be involved. My contact info is on the website. You can get a hold of me easy. And honestly, there's so many ways to get involved, and so many educational workshops and all these wonderful things that we can hold. And so definitely just give me an email, phone call, become a member, whatever it is. We just get in touch. And we do some of this. We're gonna do some great work this year.
Well, thank you so much. You're so right, and it is all connected, so very deeply connected. We feel that, and I couldn't be more grateful to both of you for all the work you do and all the wisdom you shared. We have been talking peace, and together we are talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so very much. So that is it. That's a wrap, as they call it. So thank you both so much at the end of a long, not too cold day, but it's, it just keeps going on. Yeah. So I guess it'll be a heat wave tomorrow with, maybe 40 or something. Then it goes back to 0 or something. But anyway, I'm really grateful to both of you. It was a great show. It was great to have you on. So,
yep,
and,
always a great time.
Oh, thanks a jillion. I'm glad to have you two meeting each other too. And
yes.
Yep.
Yeah, more to follow. And this will be, and you know where to find this now, or where to send it to people, or whatever, and certainly on the YouTube channel it'll be there, and it'll also be, it's going to be audio broadcast on Reverend Dr. King's birthday, actually, or recognized birthday, the Monday.
Exciting.
At 1 o'clock on WBNY. Okay, thank you both so very much. Big hugs and love. Thank you so much. Thanks a jillion. We'll see you.
Bye.
Okay, bye for
nice
now.
meeting you.
Thanks. It's great to see you.